What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Clintonville Slasher. I am your host, Lurch Frankovooks, and today we're going to be talking about the 2018 film, The Witch in the Window. So, a little rundown of the film is that you have a guy named Simon, and he has a son named Finn. Now, Simon is divorced from his wife, and Finn gets in a bunch of trouble at school for looking up some bad stuff on the internet. It's explained later what it was. So, anyway, he decides that his son is in trouble, so he decides to take him. Well, Finn and his mom live in New York, and Simon is renovating a house down in Vermont. So he takes his son for the summer, and he goes down to this house in Vermont, and he's like, hey, I'm going to renovate this house. And they're like, you're not going to flip it. His ex-wife's like, oh, you're not going to flip it. He's like, no, I'm fixing this house up. Turns out he tells his son he is flipping it, but in reality, he's trying to fix it up so he can get his family back together. So as they're walking through this house, it's an older home, and it's like really nice looking. And they're walking through the house, and they're checking it out, and they go down to the basement, and they run into the electrician, and they scare each other. Well, a little while later, they go down to the water with the electrician, and Simon and the electrician are smoking cigars, and the electrician tells him that, hey, I'm your neighbor. And he tells him a story about the house. This old lady that lived there, her name was Lydia. Don't say her name out loud. So Lydia was a really nasty person, and she ended up dying in the house. So it's kind of like the lure of this weird lady that lived in the house. And like he said that she died sitting at the window. So periodically through the movie, you see a little bit of weird things here and there. But then they two run into Lydia, and they see her sitting in the window, and they walk up to her, and they creep all the way up to her, and they look down at her, and they say her name, and she opens up her eyes, and she chases them out of the house. So they decided, they go out of the house, they go to, a restaurant, eat dinner, and then he tells his son, he's like, I'm putting you on a bus, I'm going to have to work at the house, but you got to go home, you can't stay here. And he's arguing with his dad, I need to stay with you, what are you going to do? And he's like, listen, I'm going to work during the day, and at night, I'm going to stay at the hotel. And it's going to be fine. So they stay at the neighbor's house, the electrician's house that night. And the very next day, Simon puts his son Finn on a bus. And Simon goes back to the house. So when he goes back to the house, he's working in the barn, and he's loading all this scrap. And the camera angle at this point is following Simon through his working. So it's it's watching his perspective. And he turns around the corner, and Finn's standing there. So for the next 25 minutes, they're talking about how, this is scary. This, you should have went on the bus. Why did you? They argue at first, and then they kind of they're sitting in the house, and they're talking Dad, I can't leave you. I gotta stick with you. And then the mom calls, and he's like, shit. He's like, your mom is probably upset that you're not on the bus. So she picks up the phone, and he picks up the phone and talks to him. And Finn's like, no, Dad, don't. So he picks up the phone, and he's talking to the mom, and he's like, and the mom's like, oh, Finn has been, here this whole time, or Finn's been really quiet since he's been home. And he's like, what are you talking about? What do you mean Finn's been quiet? He's like, he's there? And he's like, put him on the phone. So he puts him on the phone, and his kid's talking to him. The whole time he's talking to his son, Finn is sitting next to him. And it turns out when he gets off the phone and he looks down at him, it's the witch. Now, I have to say that is the scariest part of the movie. Everything else is pretty boring, and it's kind of a letdown. But that whole part, that 25 minutes of dialogue, that one threw me through a loop because I didn't see that coming. Excuse me. So, it's a B-rated film, but that one part made it worth watching. But other than that, it was kind of crappy. But I have to say that the cinematography was cool. That, they really tried. They didn't have a huge budget. But it had a decent budget because it was shot pretty well. The acting, it's not terrible. It's kind of a poorly written movie, They didn't really have a good enough build-up. That was the peak of their film. And that's maybe an hour into it. And then there's another 45 minutes after that kind of it built up to this really cool part, and then it just a roller coaster dip, and the ending is bad. So if you want to check it out, I actually have this on physical media. I borrowed it from my brother. But it's on Amazon Prime, it's on YouTube. You could just Google it and it'll pop up. I think it's on Tubi. Check it out if you want to. or just take my word for it, it's not that great. So if you're new, please like, comment, and subscribe. I post every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I hope you all have an awesome day. Stay horror. We'll see you next time. Later.